You know what an oxymoron is, right? An oxymoron is a figure of speech that seems to contradict itself. I jotted down just a few. There are literally hundreds of these in the English language, but here are just a few. Artificial grass, boneless ribs, harmless lie, fresh frozen, jumbo shrimp, cafeteria food, military intelligence, random order, slumber party, freezer burn, small fortune, government organization, living dead. Same difference. Plastic glasses, pretty ugly, headbutt, one of my favorites, working vacation, healthy tan, good grief, and the best of all, devout atheist. Let me give you one more oxymoron that at least that's the way people view it, when in reality it's not. Jesus party. Jesus party. You ever heard of a Jesus party? Probably not. If you made it through the 60s, you probably heard of Jesus freak. If you studied theology at all, you know about the Jesus Council, but I doubt any of you have ever heard of a Jesus party. Because Jesus, as the founder and CEO of the Christian faith, somehow along the way with what we've done with his life and what he taught, came to the conclusion that Christians don't party. Christians are supposed to be sticks in the mud. They're too devout. They're too highbrow. They're too goody-goody to really party. In fact, if you talk to Christians today, even those who have changed their life maybe from a way of living which did not glorify God, they would say, well, I used to really know how to party, but not anymore. This series of lessons is intended to help us open our eyes to the possibilities of being evangelistic. Don't let that word scare you. Evangelistic is not a big word. It's not a seminary word. It simply means good news. It means telling good news. And what I hope that we'll be able to see in this series of lessons is that the sharing of Jesus, the story of Jesus, is the good news and how he's in the life change business. And quite a few people in the world really want life change. Now, some may not admit it right now, but deep down, every single person wants their life changed for the better. That's how God wired us. But the question becomes, how do we do this effectively and efficiently? I mean, none of us have just gobs of time. You may think, well, Randy, you've really got a lot more time than the rest of us. I mean, you do this thing full time. You'd be amazed at how little time I have during the week when I do all my other stuff that has to be done to get ready for today or get ready for Wednesday or whatever. But especially you, if you're not in ministry full time, you have full-time jobs, you don't have a lot of time. And so the question becomes, well, if we're supposed to be evangelistic, and we are, how do we do it where we get the utmost out of it? Most effective, most efficient, since we don't have that much time. If you add to that the fact that many of us grew up believing, well, the way that you evangelize is you go over here and you study all your stuff over here and you keep it in a mental folder or in a physical one if you like, and you argue and you debate and you criticize other people who aren't where you think they need to be, and hopefully by debating them into a corner and making them say, uncle, then they'll come and say, yes, I want to accept Jesus today. If you grew up believing that, like I did, then that also becomes a hindrance. Well, what we want to do in these lessons is address the fact that when you read the text, forget about maybe what you were taught, forget about maybe the MO that the church where you used to belong to used. When you read the text, what you'll find out is there are many methods, many styles, many approaches to evangelism. For instance, if you thought that you had to be a Bible scholar with a perfect track record before you could share the good news, just read John 4, the story of the Samaritan woman, which we looked at a couple of weeks ago. What was her story? Married and divorced 5 times, living with a man, a Samaritan, a woman in that culture, not exactly the top of the food chain. And yet her simple invitation was what? Come and see. That's all she said. Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. The first evangelist in the book of John was not Nicodemus, the teacher of Israel. It was not the disciples. It was the Samaritan woman. So if you think you have to be a Bible scholar or have a perfect track record, forget it. Look at the Samaritan woman who said, come and see, and became an evangelist. Or maybe if you're like me, you've had this background of thinking that there's only one way to do things, only one way to think, outside the core gospel of Jesus Christ, Him crucified. But all these things that we churches tend to put together, and you become legalistic about it. And maybe that's been your history. Maybe that's where you are now. You think, well, I'm not past this yet. I'm not over this hump of being legalistic and rules driven. So we looked at Saul. who became Paul. Probably not only one of the most well-known legalists, but also one of the most well-known evangelists, who had a little encounter on the road to Damascus with a bright light. And Saul becomes Paul and becomes a great evangelist. And the more we read the text, the more stories we look at, the more characters we see, the more we're going to see that God is teaching us that there are a variety of ways to share the good news. Like the story today. Today we're going to look at a person, a most unlikely person, who's going to show us one of the most unorthodox methods of evangelism. In fact, I dare say that probably few people have ever thought about the method that we're going to look at in just a moment as a viable, useful, effective mode or style of evangelism. All right? Here's the story. We've already read it this morning. After this, that is, after he had been in the place with the disciples, calling the other disciples, Jesus went out and saw a man named Levi, also known as Matthew, at his work collecting taxes. Jesus said, "Come along with me." And he did. Walked away from everything and went with him. Levi gave a large dinner at his home for Jesus. Everybody was there, taxmen and other disreputable characters as guests at the dinner. The Pharisees and their religion scholars came to the disciples greatly offended. "What is he doing, eating and drinking with crooks and sinners?" Jesus heard about it and spoke up. "Who needs a doctor, the healthy or the sick? I'm here inviting outsiders, not insiders, an invitation to a changed life, changed inside and out." Here's where the story starts. Levi heard Jesus' call, "Come and follow me." And he left everything he had and he followed. And in his excitement about hearing the call of Christ, and in his excitement about setting down an extremely high-paying job and his only known source of income, what does he do? What's the first thing he does? He throws a party. That's exactly what you do, right? Anybody ever lost a job? Am I the only one in the room who's ever lost a job, especially a good-paying job? Terry, you and I are the only ones in the room who have ever lost a job. And in our excitement about losing our job and thinking, how will I support my family? The first thing we did was run home and throw a party. Right? Making sure everybody can see that. Maybe, you can speculate all you want. Maybe Levi had a big IRA set up. Maybe he had just been, all this extortion and overage and taxes he'd been gathering for Rome. Maybe he had a big hole in his wall in his home and he was storing well. I don't know. All I know is the text says he got up from what he was doing and followed. I personally believe that maybe Matthew was looking for a fresh start. Maybe he was looking for a way to start off. I don't know. Maybe he really believed at that moment that this is the Savior of the world and I'm going to get on board now and be part of something that's going to change the world. I don't know. All I know is that he went home and he threw a huge party where all of Israel's finest would attend. Not. No. When Matthew throws a party, he has a very select guest list. You know why? Because Matthew is among the most hated men in his society. The Jews hated him because he was a sold-out IRS agent. He's sold out. He's collecting taxes for Rome from his own people. So you can see he ranks right down there with Gentiles, maybe lower. Romans hated tax collectors because, first of all, they were Jewish. Second of all, because they typically saw them as cheaters, as swindlers, and therefore just a necessary evil in their book of how they collected money at that time. Have you ever wondered why Jesus picked such a scoundrel? I have often. When you look at the men that Jesus picked, fishermen, and tax collector, and a zealot, a man engaged in guerrilla warfare and murder, and why would Jesus pick such a guy? Now again, we can speculate all we want, but I'm wondering, based on what happens at this party, well, let's put it this way. I have been told and been taught, and it is true to a certain degree, that the reason Jesus picked Matthew was because he was able to see the person's potential without seeing all the garbage. That's true. He picked him because of his grace. That's true. I'm not so sure, though, that Jesus didn't pick Matthew because Matthew had some connections. that Jesus wanted to have influence over. Now, the reason I say that is because of what's about to happen. I think that Jesus was definitely able to see the potential in Matthew, in Levi, to connect him with a crowd that most good, God-fearing, devout, blue-blood Jews would not associate with. Now, when you are the scum of the earth, as Matthew was in the eyes of his society, whom do you invite to your party? Scum of the earth. That's your only guest list. If you're hated and an outcast, you invite the hated and the outcasts. That's all you have. The first thing that Matthew does when he gets home after quitting his job is throw a Jesus party. Now, we have to make sure our terminology is right, because you probably never thought that a party animal could be used to God's glory. Because every single one of you, when you hear the word party, or especially the word partying, automatically that is labeled as suspect, wrong, worst case scenario, downright sinful. Some of you hear party, and all you can envision is empty beer cans, cigarette butts, carpet stains, and it's the police. Scott's been on the police end of a few of those visits. Or maybe you hear the word party and you think of the movie, National Lampoon's movie, Animal House, which we'll leave to your own imagination and those who've never seen it good. Others of you have been taught, not been taught, but because of your experience, when you hear the word partying, you think about high schoolers and particularly college kids who are drinking and drugging and they're being involved in illicit relationships. But move from there now. If that's not where you are, maybe you hear the word party and think about adults who graduate to dinner parties. Dinner parties. You've been there. I've gotten in more trouble with my wife over my behavior at a dinner party than just about any other thing we've ever done that I've ever done in our marriage. Because I'm not highbrow. I'm West Texas country boy. So when we go to these nice, dressed nice, you have all the 6 dozen forks on one side of your plate, and you don't know where to start, and you gotta, you don't they don't serve ice cream, they serve sorbet, and everything's, and don't do, I just hate that. And so I tend to act out a little bit. When I acted a little more like Jeb at those kinds of functions than I do Randy. Kelly, that's the first time she's amened in 10 years of preaching. Here's what happens at dinner parties often. Not all dinner parties, okay, but many that I've been to. The focus is on social recognition, it's on clothing choices, and it's on fine dining. Who's with who? And look at what she's wearing, and isn't this beautiful china, and what year is this wine? Lots of these parties turn into, now listen, who's who doing who knows what with you know who. Now you've been there, and you know that that's true. And here's the deal. The problem with these parties is not the content, it's with the purpose. Some people would stand on one side and they would condemn all kinds of these gatherings. Other people might stand on the other side of the fence and defend them as harmless. And here's my point. My point is this. If we think that frat parties or dinner parties are the bomb and that's the way you party, let me tell you something, Christians. We don't know how to party. I love to party. Problem is having to switch from the way we think about what real partying is to a Jesus party. What constitutes a Jesus party? You're about to find out, because the Lord, who would invite a scum of the earth guy like Matthew to be a disciple, can teach us a whole lot about partying. So, if it's going to be an authentic Jesus party, not a frat party, not a dinner party, a Jesus party, it's got to be a celebration. It's got to be a celebration. This is not hard for us. We're already well versed in the practice of celebrating. We throw parties for everything. We'll tailgate for 3 hours prior to the game and then go to a victory party afterwards for one game. We know how to party. We know how to celebrate, rather. There are bachelor parties and birthday parties, and that's like weddings. You got a bachelor party before the wedding, you got a reception afterwards, as though you haven't partied enough in the last 2 days. You have one all over the place. Anniversary parties for marriages and for churches. Our 4th is coming up. Christmas, Valentine's. We have parties because we love to celebrate. And we should. That's the way God wired us. God wired us to celebrate and enjoy the festivities. Jesus made gallons and gallons and gallons of the best wine they had ever tasted at the wedding feast, because they went on for 7 days. Don't tell me that God didn't wire us to enjoy and celebrate these events. But here's the deal. Sometimes religion throws a wet blanket on our celebratory spirit. I like the passage in Luke 15. A lot of men and women of doubtful reputation were hanging around Jesus, listening intently. The Pharisees and religion scholars were not pleased, not at all pleased. They growled. He takes in sinners and eats meals with them, treating them like old friends. Their grumbling triggered this story. That's Luke 15, 1 through 3 in the Message. Now, what follows after this statement are 3 separate but related stories. You probably know all the stories, but for those maybe who don't know the stories, let me just give you a quick synthesis. There's 3 stories here. Stories of lost sheep, lost cash, and lost son. Those are the 3 stories. All 3 are found right after this statement. And so you read the first one about the lost sheep, which is found by the owner. And here's what the text says. The owner of the sheep says, "Celebrate with me. I found my lost sheep." Count on it, Jesus says. There's more joy in heaven over one sinner's rescued life than over 99 good people in no need of rescue. Here's what I want you to see. Follow me. Something is lost, a lost sheep. There's 99 that aren't lost, but there's one that is lost. And they recover the sheep. What is the reaction? What is supposed to be the reaction to that one lost sheep that's recovered? Jesus says, count on it. They're having a party in heaven. Celebrate. All right? The next one. Woman loses a coin. She's got 10 coins. She's got 9 still, but she lost 1. And she sweeps and sweeps and sweeps till she finds the coin. And what does she say? Celebrate with me. I found my lost coin. Count on it. That's the kind of party God's angels throw every time one lost soul turns to God. So you've got a short story about lost sheep, a short story about lost cash, and then a long story about a lost son. But you know what's interesting is really the prodigal son, and I guess is a good way to remember that parable, but that parable is not so much about the prodigal son, about the younger son, as it is the older brother. You know, the son says, "Dad, give me my cash that you owe me. I know you're not dead yet," which was a slap in the face, "but give it to me anyway." And he goes off, and as his brother says, spends his money on wild partying and whores. And he comes home after a stop off at the pig's sty to eat with the pigs for a while, and he comes home, throws himself at the mercy of the father. "I'll just be a servant, I'll be a slave, just let me come back home." And you know what happens. Father runs to meet him, first of all, hugs him up, kisses him, puts ring on his finger and shoes on his feet, and they have a fat calf barbecue. And here's what he says: "Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he's found." So they began to celebrate. You find the sheep, you celebrate. You find the cash, you celebrate. The son comes home and you celebrate. That's the reaction until the older brother gets wind. Best sermon I've ever heard, preached by a man who was in my seminary, was entitled, "I Will Not Dance." And coming from my background, you know how funny of a title that was. It was about this, and how the brother came up and heard the sound of music and dancing and said, "I will not dance. I will not go in." In fact, this message says, the older brother stalked off in an angry sulk and refused to join in. I wonder who should have gotten the punchline in this story. Well, you know who it was. You go all the way back. What do you say at the very beginning? "This man takes in sinners and eats with them, treating them like old friends." The legalists, the Pharisees, did not see the recovery of these kinds of people as any reason to celebrate. And so these parables are directed at them. Do you know, it breaks my heart to have to say that most of the baptisms I've witnessed in my life have been in deafening silence. Does that not irk you? Now wait a minute. Heaven is rejoicing. Heaven's throwing a party. In fact, the angels have put together one big cosmic celebration, and someone goes under the water of baptism and comes up a new person, Romans chapter 6 says, you might get amen. Simply put, that's absolutely wrong. I can't say it's sinful. I don't know the people's. It's wrong. If the angels are celebrating over one lost soul coming home, what in the world should we be doing? So if it's going to be a Jesus party, it has to be about celebration. Celebration. Which is easy for us because we already know how to do that. And if it's going to be an authentic Jesus party, it's got to take social risks. Have you ever been to a party, probably a dinner party, where it was obvious that the host and or hostess were simply trying to be accepted into the group of people that they invited? Have you ever been to one of those? I have. It was obvious that the people that were there were invited to be there so that they would look favorably upon the host and or hostess to include them in their little social clique. Or maybe have you ever been to a party where the host and hostess invited only the most prestigious, most socially well-known people to entertain so that that's somehow moved them up, the ladder of society's recognition? You ever been to one of those parties? I have. Where that was the entire purpose of the party. I want you to notice what Levi did not do. When he got up from the table to follow Jesus, he did not run to the leaders, the Pharisees, and those who were always haranguing them and say, I've quit my job. I'm no longer part of the IRS. Now you can accept me. I quit. I'm not collecting taxes for Rome anymore. Let me offer some sacrifices. Let me do something to get back into your good graces. That's not what he does. He didn't try to impress anybody, especially those who had snubbed him. What he did was he went home and invited his people. Over in our Wednesday night class, this is the method we're calling the My People method. The My People style. Scum of the earth, viewed by society, goes home and invites scum of the earth, his people. Socially risky. The message says there were other tax men and disreputable characters as his guests. Why would Matthew want to bring scumbags under his roof to have a party for Jesus? Because scumbags were the only friends he had. He wanted to bring his people because he knew where he had been, and Jesus accepted him anyway. If it's going to be a Jesus party, it's got to take some social risks. I want to be part of putting together Jesus parties that are more like a night at Cheers than they are an experience in a Sunday morning pew. For those of you who've never seen the show because it's past where you watch television, you're too young to remember it. Here's the chorus of the theme song. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You want to be where everybody knows your name. You want to know why these smoky, alcohol-laden places called bars are so popular? Because they accept all people. Everybody's accepted there. That's the way Jesus was. He knew that browbeating to discipleship would never last. Guilting people into discipleship would never last. He wanted people to want to follow him. That's what he wanted. Because he knew he could never have the right kind of influence over them and in them until they decided on their own, this is what I want to do. That's why he says, any man who puts his hands to the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom. Why? Because he wants you to want to go. Not sit there going, well, I'd rather be here plowing my fields, but I guess I better go with Jesus, or I guess I better stay here for my dad's funeral, or wait till he dies and then have his funeral. He wants us to want to. Now hear me clearly. I'm not saying let's have church in a bar. I'm saying let's build a church that's more fun than a bar. Why not? People who go to bars and spend their life doing that are so empty, looking for something. But if they have to come in here and sit on a pew and be tongue lashed for 45 minutes, the choice is not difficult. If no one has ever loved them unconditionally, no matter where they have been, no matter what they've done, Samaritan woman or worse, no wonder they're looking for love in all the wrong places. One of the main accusations that Jesus ever had leveled against him in all the Gospels is, you hang out with sinners. So guys, if it's going to be a Jesus party, there better be some sinners there. You remember the statement made to Rubel Shelley by one of the elders in his church? What's going to happen when our church, all this preaching you're doing on grace, and all of our pews start filling up with disreputable people and whores and all these people been divorced? What's going to happen? He said, we'll finally be the church that Jesus built. It has to be socially risky. And last of all, for it to be an authentic Jesus party, the ultimate purpose must be changed lives. Now, you've got to understand this. This is the tenet of this lesson this morning that separates a Jesus party from frat parties or dinner parties or bachelor parties. And here's what I mean. All those other parties and more can be celebrations. Birthday parties are celebrations. The great time we had at the Valentine's party a couple weeks ago was a celebration. Frat parties can be celebrations. And you can even have parties that might be considered socially risky. But I'll guarantee you one thing, if it's not a Jesus party, the party that you're attending cares nothing about change on an eternal level. Nothing. In fact, bars stay in business not because people change, but because they stay the same. Right? That's why they don't get any more of my money. They bank on you staying the same. They don't promote change, they reinforce. Just live it like it is now. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die. That's an old way of thinking that goes back even prior to Jesus. These places, these parties, I don't care what kind of party it is, can show you a good time and you can celebrate, but they could care less about your soul. And that's the difference in a Jesus party. Jesus hung out with sinners because that's where he was at his best. That is where Jesus was at his best, when he hung out with sinners. You know why? We have a sin problem. God sends Jesus as a solution. That's the equation. Man, sin problem. God, solution. Bridge in the middle, Jesus. And any church that does not actively seek out and try to draw in the kind of people, the outsiders, as Jesus says, they're just kidding themselves. They're just playing status quo church. If you're not actively seeking the same people he sought, we're just playing games. And I've got news for you. I'm too old and life is too short to play church games anymore. I'm not going to do it. Jesus spent his time with the sick and tired because the sick and tired are sick and tired of being sick and tired. Now, that's true. What is it I'm always saying? And you know it's true. Until the pain of staying the same exceeds the pain of change, you'll never change. You know what? The sick and tired are pretty tired of being sick and tired. That's why he's there. So he can write something new on their hearts. To be a Jesus party, the purpose is not to impress other people or showcase our gourmet talents or lead people down to the wine cellar. A Jesus party intentionally targets the weak, hurting, tired of the world folks who desperately want and need change. That's what a Jesus party does. So you're thinking, what's this got to do with me? It's got everything to do with you. If you're thinking, well, I can't evangelize, I don't know, I can't lead somebody in a Bible study, I can't get up and do what you do, Randy, and I can't, you know what? You can throw a Jesus party. Or you can be part of organizing a Jesus party. Or you can be a servant in a Jesus party. It's very easy. You celebrate, you take some risk with who you invite, and you make sure that the reason you're doing it is to build relationships so that people ultimately can change their life to look more like Jesus.